Hello there, and welcome to today's video, in which I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Rachel Moseley and Professor Julie Gamble-Turner, who are the co-authors of Autistic Menopause, which is a very recent publication. But before we go into the video, I just want to give you an idea of who this video is for. And it's essentially for anybody with an interest in the autistic perimenopause and menopause. And although we do talk about the publication in this video, this Q&A was really about giving an opportunity for people within the community to ask Rachel and Julie about their research into the autistic menopause. And it's super interesting. So without any further ado, let's get started. I wonder if, firstly, you could both tell me a little bit about your professional background and areas of specialism. And I don't know who wants to go first.
Rachel, do you want to go first?
Sure, I
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go first. First off, I will say I'm losing my voice and I have a bit of a cold, so please forgive me, everyone. I sound a bit strange.
No problem.
I'm Rachel, obviously, and my background is it's actually in cognitive neuroscience. So I was interested in studying the function and structure of, how do autistic brains work, and how does that give rise to our experience of the world. But I moved away from that into more broader psychology because I'm much more interested now in more, what's our experience of the world like. And so my background is kind of psychology, and my areas of research focus are really around autistic adults' lives and their well-being and mental health.
Thank you for that. And you, Julie?
Hi, well, I'm Julie. I'm a health psychologist, and I specialise in the effects of stress on health and well-being across the lifespan. So I've done a lot of work with children, but also with adults and into older age. And I'm particularly interested in midlife health and menopause most recently. And most of my work has looked at the effects of stress responses and stress hormones on health at different parts of the lifespan. So menopause fits really well into that. I've got many years, more than I like to admit, experience of working in research and teaching, and I'm currently a visiting professor at Bournemouth University, and I'm also a recently certified menopause coach as well, and in the process of setting up my own coaching business with a focus on menopause, particularly for neurodivergent women.
Oh gosh, that's fascinating. Thank you for that. So why did you both write the Autistic Menopause, or Autistic Menopause? There's no "the" on there, but just really interesting to know how it all came together, really. Sorry, I should say, perhaps you want to go first, Rachel?
Sure. I mean, I had something that came to my mind, and we'll see if Julie, I'm sure you'll remember this, and I'm sure you'll add on to it. In one of our very first studies, we asked autistic people what they felt they might need and want in relation to menopause, so what kind of support. And I distinctly remember one participant who said, give us other autistic people, give us stories. We want to hear that we're not alone and hear that other people are going through this. We want, examples and stories we can learn from and feel not alone. And so I think that when we got the opportunity to write the book, it seemed like a really clear opportunity to give people stories and information and sort of empower them in that way.
Wow, honestly, you're making me tear up because that's how I felt when I read this book. It was just amazing to hear my experience through other people's words, really. It was really, honestly, quite a profound experience at times. So, but I'm not going to cry, which is a really ridiculous response to what you've said. So yeah, it was really. Well, I think it's a really important book, and I'd say it's essential reading actually for anybody who will go through the autistic menopause at any point of their life, really. And yeah, I just found it, yeah, just such an important piece of writing, and I only wish that I could have stumbled across it, 10 years ago. But 10 years ago, I didn't know I was autistic, so I probably wouldn't have picked the book up anyway. But it's finding all these pieces that sort of come together. But yeah, I just implore anybody with an interest in autistic menopause to have a read. So was there anything you found particularly surprising through your research into autistic menopause? And I don't know who wants to answer
You
this
want
one.
to take this one first, Julie, then I can add something if I think of anything.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, well, I think when Rachel and I started first talking about, I think it was about 8 years ago now, about looking at this area, sort of combining this area of menopause and autism, we went out and looked at what was out there in the research literature, and we were really surprised. I suppose that's the first surprising thing, was that there was nothing there.
Yeah,
Which normally you'd find a few things, something to build on, but there was really virtually nothing there. So that was quite a surprise. And then I think when we started doing work in the area, we, as Rachel says about the voice of what women were telling us, it was really strong, really clear that we don't have, there is a huge need, and we don't have anything to fill that need. Nobody's listening to us, and there's nothing to show that there might be something different about menopause for autistic people. So I think that was the surprise, really, in terms of when we first started on that research journey. And that's continued to be the case, hasn't it? That the need has just sort of, we've seen it really grow in terms of what people are asking for.
yeah. Gosh, that's so interesting. Just to think there was just nothing out there is absolutely bonkers, really. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything there, Rachel. Sorry, don't know if you wanted to add anything there.
Not at all. I mean, I would just reiterate what Julie said. And I think one other thing that we found really interesting was that we were hearing from a lot of people that menopause was such a kind of tipping point for them, that of course where many neurodivergent people assign female at birth, they grew up undiagnosed.
Yeah,
We see that many they appear to have such a strain and such a tipping point at menopause, that we hear from autistic people and ADHDers that this is a point where everything becomes too much, and suddenly they are very obviously, visibly neurodivergent and struggling. And hence, there's that really interesting kind of aspect of neurodivergence kind of changing at menopause and becoming more obvious. And I think that's...
yeah, I can relate for sure.
Well, I think that's something really interesting, that both Julie and I have found, because when you come to this topic, you sort of think about menopause symptoms, and you think about how being neurodivergent, what might it be like to experience menopause symptoms as a neurodivergent person? But we didn't really start by thinking about the reverse relationship, about how does menopause change your experience of being neurodivergent?
Wow,
and in the book, we really kind of tap into this kind of two-way street, where being neurodivergent affects your experience of menopause, and going through menopause affects your experience of neurodivergence as well.
Yeah, I think I remember a quote from the book that menopause fuels autism and autism fuels menopause. And I just think, gosh, couldn't explain it any better, really. It just feels like everything's ramped up. It's, really good quote. So I guess you've kind of answered this question, but how did you arrive at the decision to include the autistic experts in your book, who are 16 autistic people who are either in perimenopause or who have been through the process? So just fascinated to hear how you sort of came up with that idea, and how you were able to get these people involved with your projects. I don't know who wants to answer this one.
Rachel, do you want to take that one?
I'm really happy to. And then if you want,
go ahead.
Yeah. I'd say first off, it was never a question. It was just a completely obvious. There was never any question in our minds that we would need autistic experts' voices in the book. We had participants in our studies, of course, but we wanted to, again, giving people stories. And I think especially in many spaces, lived experience needs to be respected and brought forward. And we haven't personally been through an autistic menopause.
Yeah.
I may in time, I'm not quite there, but because we couldn't necessarily say, we've got that lived experience.
Yeah.
It was just, there was never any doubt that we needed autistic people to tell us. And kind of, did you want to add anything, Julie?
I was going to say exactly the same, actually. It wasn't a difficult decision at all. We wanted to make the book more relatable. And those autistic experts were the ones that were telling the story of their experience the best. We couldn't have put it in our own words any better. Well, we certainly wouldn't have been able to try. And I think the interviews, what they shared with us in the interviews, it was such depth that people were willing to talk about. And yeah, I mean, doing the interviews, that made me sort of really tear up quite a few times at what people were saying, and just the fact that they were prepared to share that with us, and they gave us such brilliant quotes that we could include.
I think for me, that's it was one of the most striking parts of the book, having these experts with you, because it felt like, and I did say in my book review, it felt like being in a kind of peer support group, and it felt like you were kind of being supported by these other people with a shared experience, really. And of course, being an autistic person, the last thing I want to do is to actually go to a physical peer support group, because I'm just not that kind of person. I would rather sit at home and whether it be through the online autistic community, etc. That's how I've been able to find my tribe in many ways. But to be able to have a book that feels like a peer support group was it felt far more comfortable for me than actually going out to a group session, really.
I would say they were so very, as Julie said, they were so very generous with their experiences and also their selves.
Yeah.
And it really felt like a real privilege to sort of work with their interviews as we went through the book. And it felt, we obviously didn't know them at all well. We wouldn't have known their names, and we wouldn't be able to pick them out on the street. But it felt like we worked with them so closely when we were working with their interviews and got to know them so well. And so they were really real to us as people, and hopefully that also comes across in the book.
Absolutely it does. Yeah, they almost feel like friends at some parts. Honestly, it really did feel like that for me. So where do you think this research will take you next?
Shall I start, Rachel? I'm sure you'll have other things to pick up on, but we've got other ongoing research at the moment, in particular a large study that a postgraduate student is conducting with us for their PhD, which is funded by an external company who saw our research and picked up on that. So in that study, it's a direct comparison between autistic and non-autistic people going through the menopause, which is really what was lacking before. There's some research now about that, but a lot of the work is really focusing just on autistic menopause without doing a direct comparison with non-autistic people. So that's really we're coming towards the end of that study, but that's, I suppose, one of the biggest studies, that the next piece of research we're doing. But there are various other things as well, aren't there, Rachel?
Yes, I was going to also add, starting to do a little, this is very relevant, because some of your questions relate to HRT. And I wanted to kind of speak to the very, very valid point you made, that we talk very little about HRT in the book. And it's quite deliberate, because essentially because we don't know anything. There is no research out there on autistic people's experiences of HRT.
And so that's not surprising.
That is one of the next studies that we're trying to get together to understand a bit more about that.
I think that would be just so useful. I think for me, in terms of my own experience with HRT, I know that other autistic people will relate to this, but I almost have in my life felt like a second class kind of person, and it's about low self-esteem, etc. And it was almost like I needed somebody to give me the permission to go and speak to my GP about HRT, because I just felt like HRT is for other people, for normal people, and it's not an option for me, which seems utterly ridiculous in hindsight, but that's how I felt, and I don't doubt that's going to be a feeling among other autistic people as well. And it was only through seeing the Davina McCall documentary that I thought, you know what, I'm going to go to my GP and ask about this. I had tried HRT before, but because it didn't work for me, I just felt, that's it. That's not an option for me. But it was just amazing to hear somebody say, HRT might not work the first time, so go to your GP, advocate for yourself, and ask for other versions of HRT. And I just thought, mention that really. I think that's going to be a common thread among autistic people. It's almost having that permission to go and ask your GP, because you're allowed to. So I'm just going to move on to community questions and comments now, if that's okay. The first one that we have here, and I think it's a good starting point actually, what are the fundamental differences between autistic menopause and neurotypical menopause? And I don't know who wants to answer this one.
I have something in my head, but you sure? Okay. First off, and this may be my very pedantic brain, but I'd first want to say there is no absolute stereotypical autistic and non-autistic menopause. So, one thing I'd want to say really strongly, we hear such varying experiences from non-autistic people. Some people have a really easy time, some people have a really hard time, and likewise in autistic people, we hear some people have a really easy time. Of course, when we do our research, the people who are interested in our studies, they are typically the people who've struggled. So I think I'd want, and this really comes across in the book, there really is no archetypal autistic and non-autistic, because everyone's experience is so different.
I think the more I've spoken to other people, or other autistic people in the community in perimenopause and menopause, it's really striking actually how different all of our experiences are, really. So it's fascinating.
I think the key difference, and I don't want to talk too much, and I might hand over to Julie, is I think that one of the key differences is that autistic people have these pre-existing differences. So menopause doesn't come on top of a sort of baseline, a kind of flat baseline. It kind of comes on top of, you already struggle with your emotions, things like this. And you might also have these various, you're more likely to have a history of trauma, mental illness. You're more likely to have these various tick boxes that might make it harder for you. Do you want to add anything on that, Julie?
Oh no, you put that perfectly, Rachel. I think overall, it's really that the underlying autistic features, like sensory sensitivities, cognitive differences, struggles with emotion regulation, social relationships, those are all things that people struggle with during menopause. And so the menopausal symptoms tap into all of those. And so if you're already struggling with those types of experiences or features, then it kind of exacerbates those sorts of features. So it's because menopause isn't just about the physical symptoms, but it also affects emotions and mood and how you think and your attention, memory, communication, all these other things, as well as your confidence and self-esteem. So these are all things that autistic people may already be struggling with, which is why autistic menopause is different or perhaps more accentuated. As Rachel says, it's not the same for everybody, and there are some people who don't have symptoms, or autistic people who don't find it that menopause is as bad as other people do. So we don't want to be kind of frightening people or making you think that there's this big event that's going to happen and that it's going to be automatically worse for autistic people. But it's a general trend that we've noticed.
Yeah, thank you ever so much for that. I think that clarifies things really well. Thank you. Is there evidence that menopause can make autism worse? I guess that carries on from that particular question.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that comes back to what we were saying just now about there being a reciprocal relationship between menopause symptoms amplifying autism and autism amplifying menopause. So it's not making autism worse as such, but the experience of menopause and of being autistic kind of amplify each other.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, this is sorry, did you want to say anything
I was
there?
just going to add on to that. Yes, as Julie said, it's not exactly making autism worse, but it might change your experience of your autism. So things that were previously working for you might not work for you as well, or they might. So things like it's really important to say we also see this in ADHD as it changes aspects of their ADHD, like their ability to control their attention. So whereas, for instance, people perhaps before they weren't struggling as much with their sensory sensitivities or with hyperfocus, things like this, whereas at menopause, their experience of those things changes and it might actually become harder to live with. So it's a challenging one.
Yeah, thank you for that. This is a question about HRT, so I don't know if you want to try it and see whether it's one for you. Okay. I'd like to know how much is known about adverse reactions to HRT in AFAB autists, because I had a terrible reaction when I tried it last year and I just gave up and went back on the pill. Next year when I turn 50, I won't be allowed on the pill anymore, and I'm worried that I also won't be able to have any HRT and will just have to go through the rest of perimenopause and menopause unsupported.
Shall I start with that one? I think we both have something to say on this one, though.
Okay.
First off, I'm really sorry that you're sitting in this kind of worried position. As I mentioned earlier, we really know very little about whether neurodivergent people respond to HRT in a different way. What we know sort of from our interviews and from kind of anecdotal reports from some clinicians is that neurodivergent people can be very sensitive to hormonal fluctuations. So it means that they might need more support to start HRT and to find the right type and the right dosage and so forth. So we do hear this, and we do hear some people say, I'm too sensitive to it, it doesn't work for me. But then we also hear some people say, my God, it's a lifesaver. So that kind of speaks to the first part, because certainly we definitely hear from some people who say, I need it. But I think the second part of your question, where you say you're worried that you won't be allowed the pill and you won't be able to have HRT and you'll go through menopause unsupported, that's such a frightening space to be in. And I hate that you feel that, and that you perhaps don't feel you have the medical support to help you find, because there are so many different dosages, but you need that healthcare support to help you find the right one and type. I think Julie can probably speak a lot more to this if you want to add anything, Julie.
Well, yes, I agree with what you were saying, Rachel, but also there are different types of HRT, but there are also many different forms of it now as well. So things are changing all the time with HRT and what is licensed and what's not. So I would encourage that person to speak to their GP, go back to their GP more than once if they need to they can really try and or see somebody different, or get a referral to a menopause specialist. But there are, as well as HRT, there are many other therapeutic approaches. I mean, medication, which isn't HRT, but also other more psychosocial or therapeutic approaches, which can really help, can be really beneficial. Whether that's CBT or coaching, lifestyle changes. So there is an awful lot of support out there for women, an increasing amount. So yeah, you don't have to go through it alone.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I did notice actually when I was asking for questions that there were a few about progesterone intolerance specifically, and certainly for me that's the case as well. So I think it's quite interesting that comes up quite so often actually, as our experiences with HRT really.
It's a massive gap in our knowledge. So anecdotally, for instance, we recently wrote a paper with Dr. Claire Spencer of my Menopause Centre, and she made this point that she sees a lot of neurodivergent patients who have that progesterone sensitivity, but we don't have the empirical data. That's really important to say at this point.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Right, so moving on to the next one. I already struggle with my mental health, and I hear that perimenopause often makes it even worse. I'm finding it harder and harder to mask and keep on my customer service face at work. I can relate to that. Is there any way to prevent a doom spiral into complete catastrophe and unemployment? It just makes me so sad, this comment. Sorry, I don't know if any of you want to take that one, or either of you.
Shall I start, Rachel?
Yeah, if you're happy.
I'm sure you'll have things to pick up on, but I'd start by saying that you're not alone, and there's so many of the women that we've spoken to have had that experience. So, and as well as the sort of personal support that we already mentioned, I think you could also seek support at work, and employers are increasingly offering menopause support in the workplace, and menopause action plans are actually coming in soon by law, actually mandatory. For larger companies, I don't know what size the work is that person does, but that's for larger companies. But I think workplaces are increasingly looking to improve the provision of support for menopause. So there are lots of necessary adjustments that could be made to the work environment, and that might help, particularly in relation to having to keep up with that customer service face that they mentioned, whether that's regular breaks or having accessible restroom, or understanding really to enable you to have adjustments within that role. And there may be other support groups at work, or other forms of support if a support group wasn't suitable. So I think there's both sort of personal factors, medication and other things that you can seek, but also directly support in the workplace.
That's good advice. Thank you. Do you have anything to add there, Rachel?
I can, if that's helpful. First off, I meant to say in response to a previous question, there's also non-medicinal kind of complementary things, like more natural remedies you can also try. And I think we'll talk more about them later on.
Okay.
What I was going to add was we have done a little bit of work with an organisation called Henpicked, Menopause in the Workplace, which Julie mentioned, funded the research of our PhD student, Uni Kim, whose work is in the book. So they wanted to put together a little bit of advice for workplaces with neurodivergent employees. Because, of course, you do, as Julie said, you have reasonable adjustments that can be made in relation to menopause, but what about neurodivergent menopause? And so we don't have a lot of informational guidance in that space right now, but we did put together a little resource with Henpicked. Henpicked have it on their website. You are very welcome to reach out to me and I will send it to you. One thing I would just say about it is, as well as exploring reasonable adjustments related to menopause, I always think it's a really good idea to explore reasonable adjustments related to autism or ADHD, because it might be that you've looked at them before and you thought, I don't need these. But because of the way your autism or your ADHD might change at menopause, actually some of the adjustments you need might be more kind of related to neurodivergence. So maybe if you have a role which involves a lot of kind of customer facing, you might be able, with a reasonable adjustment, to maybe reduce that, or at least have a mechanism that you can say, oh, I really don't think I can. I'm worried I won't be able to be customer facing today. So yeah, I guess there are things you can share with your employer around sort of making adjustments that might be neurodivergent friendly and also menopause friendly.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that. Is that available as a web resource, Rachel? Because I can add that in the bottom of the video description.
I'm not sure if it's freely available.
Right.
Don't know if you know, Julie.
I'm not sure. It may well be.
Looked like you were going to possibly add something.
Well, it just occurred to me then, I was thinking throughout the book and the interviews that we did, and our other work, as well as people saying that they found it more difficult to keep that mask up, which is what I think this person is saying, when they're going through menopause. What we also found, and something we haven't mentioned, is that some people didn't know, who hadn't had a diagnosis of autism before. It was going through menopause and through those symptoms that brought that to the fore and prompted them to seek a diagnosis. So that just occurred to me that we hadn't really mentioned.
Yeah, that's certainly true for me, actually. It was really menopause that kind of alerted me to something else going on, really. It was, I had a kind of ramping up of autistic traits. So it's, I sought a diagnosis 2 years ago because it was just becoming really overwhelming. So, it's just fascinating that this happens, really. Okay, I recently went through the process of getting a diagnosis of ME/CFS. And apparently I'm like this due to being autistic and postmenopausal. I'm 56 and haven't had a period for 14 years, so I'll continue being frustrated. So I suspect they're asking if there's a link there between being postmenopausal autistic and having chronic illness. I don't know who wants to take it.
I'll happily. I think probably maybe the same with Julie. Your experience immediately resonates with one of our book experts, Daisy, who talked about how menopause sort of set off a chain reaction of all these rare health conditions coming to the surface. And one of the things that we explain in the book, and I know Julie especially knows about, is how you're losing a lot of those kind of neuroprotective effects of estrogen during menopause. And it means that if you already have differences, or if you have damage that involves the central nervous system, like the brain, that damage can kind of become more obvious. Or if you have an illness like ME or chronic fatigue syndrome that affects the nervous system, then likewise, when you're losing those neuroprotective effects of estrogen, it can kind of make it worse. Do you want to add anything on that, Julie?
No, I think you put that really well, Rachel. And I think with other ongoing chronic health conditions, long-term conditions, there seems to be very little work that really links that up with menopause and also with HRT. Those are often treated very separately, and medically, in our experience of speaking with women, that there are two separate lines of thought. They don't really link up in terms of medical care as often as they should.
Thank you for that. What I have really noticed since being perimenopausal and autistic is that my tolerance for overstimulation has gone down a lot. What I used to be able to tolerate, I no longer can. Some people might say I'm more sensitive or irritable, although I hear non-autistic women can experience something similar, like a patience reduction. So I guess that they're asking if there is there a difference between the autistic menopause and the neurotypical menopause in terms of tolerance for stimulation, really, or tolerance for overstimulation?
Do you want to start with this one, Julie?
Yeah, well, I think what that person describes so well, in terms of sort of decreased tolerance or decrease in patience, is a really common menopause symptom for all women.
Yeah.
And we've seen that to be particularly so in autistic women. So again, as we said before, because of those the underlying experiences and underlying features of autism, the sort of I think you called it more greater sensitivity or irritability, that really comes to the fore. And so I think it's something that all women seem to, autistic and non-autistic, seem to have, but again is a really good example of something where autistic women seem to find is particularly emphasized during menopause.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add there, Rachel? Lovely. I haven't started perimenopause yet, or at least I don't think I have, but I wonder if there's any connection to the experience of puberty in terms of severity of symptoms and mood changes.
This one feels tailor-made for you, Julie, but I'm happy likewise. I don't know.
Oh,
Oh, I was thinking about biopsychosocial transition points in the.
yeah. Well, there does seem to be some evidence, but it's not a foregone conclusion, I think is the best thing to say here. There is some evidence that if you're, again, it's more sensitivity to hormones. If you're sensitive to hormones at certain points, like puberty, and during monthly menstrual periods, then your experience at menopause may be similar. But I think that the evidence is not conclusive on that.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Rachel, if you want to
add on putting you on the spot, Julie. You answered actually much better than I was thinking, because I think I misunderstood the question slightly. I was going to say they're similar. Menopause and puberty, they are both neurological transition points, but I think as you explained much more clearly, and what we say in the book is that sometimes your experience of these earlier transitions can also kind of carry forward into the future. And so, for instance, if you struggle to get help during pregnancy or during puberty, if you have negative experience seeking healthcare, then you're going to potentially find it harder to kind of come forward. And I suppose, yeah, having this kind of life. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to preach, but we need, whenever we're looking at someone, we always have to kind of look at their whole life experience that has brought them to that point.
Yeah, thank you. Is perimenopause likely to start sooner and end later in autistic people? And does it generally go on for longer?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, you go ahead, Rachel.
Hey, this is a really, really interesting one. I don't think the easy answer is we don't know, but we have speculations. There's multiple things that could be going on here. So what we know and what we talk about in the book is that if you experience a lot of life stress and adversity, it ages your body and your brain. So the kind of impact of stress on your body and brain is that it sort of ages them. So we know that people with a history of life stress can enter menopause slightly earlier. So
Right.
there's that argument that might say that maybe autistic people enter menopause slightly earlier, but there's also potential. So we know that many autistic people have hormone-related conditions such as PCOS, which I believe would then result in you entering menopause later. So the really simple answer is we don't know. There is some evidence to suggest that perhaps autistic people might experience symptoms that go on for longer or maybe reduce more slowly, but it's really, really, really preliminary evidence, so I don't think we really can say anything about it right now.
Okay, thank you for that, and I appreciate your honesty. You know, it's really refreshing. So thank you for that. Okay, I am now 20 years post-menopause, so I don't have any questions. It is a comment though, but would like to comment that during perimenopause, I found it extremely difficult to explain my symptoms to my GP and the impacts they had on my ability to work and on day-to-day living. As a consequence, I was pretty much dismissed as worried well and received no help at all. Communication differences are common to neurodivergent people and is a problem that we can make the difference between receiving care or not. So I guess, how do we advocate for ourselves better with our GPs, really? Take this book with you.
In seriousness, that was one function we wanted the book to have.
Yeah, I would, to be honest. I think if I was really struggling, I would, and maybe highlight some bits out of there. Because I know, I think it's a common experience, and I've had a dreadful time with GPs in the past.
So we do have a chapter in the book about advice for healthcare professionals, and which is equally relevant to autistic women themselves as well. And we've got some pointers at the end of our book, a couple of pages where we suggest ways that people might be able to advocate for themselves in healthcare situations, or have somebody to come and advocate for them with their health provider, so that they can be helped better. And I think, yes, I think we do say in the book that take this book with you, or send this to your GP, so that they are more aware of the needs of that patient.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I've just dropped a sheet of paper.
Did I do that justice, Rachel? You explain these things much better than me.
Right. This one comes back to HRT and natural options. I'm interested in learning what we can do on our own in terms of maybe herbs or supplements, food, exercise, proper sleep, etc., as well as what holistic approach a doctor can help with us. HRT is a mystery to me, so I'd like to understand that better. Are there natural HRT options?
Rachel, do you want to?
Yeah, totally. I'll start, but I think you'll have some really helpful things to add. You'll probably know more about this than me. But we heard from a lot of the autistic people in our book that they had really varied, ingenious ways, strategies to cope with menopausal symptoms. So I remember one person who talked about cold water baths and cold water swimming, which there's quite a bit of research into that as a helpful method. They talked about acupuncture. They talked about, we had someone who had really benefited from herbal medicine. And I remember a wonderful quote from someone about just giving yourself what you need. Going back to what you say, right, giving yourself permission to give yourself what you need. So another strategy that people really talked about was giving yourself permission to say no to things and to sort of take more time for yourself. But there are actually quite a few a few things you can do in terms of like supplements. I'm trying to remember them. There's one that always escapes my memory.
Editing Lizzie here. Rachel confirmed afterwards it's black cohosh she was thinking of. And although it's generally well tolerated, as with any supplement, it's worth doing your research and maybe speaking to your doctor or a medical practitioner before starting. Yeah, I really like that, giving yourself permission. Actually, I found, for me personally, I guess I'm semi-fortunate in a way that I'm chronically ill, so I'm home-based. So it allows me to go to bed for an hour in the afternoon, which I find is essential because I just can't function if I don't do that. And, I know this is a luxury for many people to be able to do. But for me, I found it really helpful because I just get tired so often now that I never used to be like this at all. So yeah, I think giving yourself permission to do things that make you feel safe and secure and rested is just so important, really.
One of our book experts, Tara, had some lovely things to say about this, about sort of reflecting kindly on where you're at and what you've done today. So yeah, being really compassionate.
Yeah, it's really important.
I think that there are so many. In addition to HRT, there are some non-HRT medications, so non-hormonal medications. But as Rachel says, there are so many other supplements, but also lifestyle factors, nutrition, exercise, sleep, and social relationships, and really helping people to feel back in control of their life again, because it feels often with menopause that everything's sort of out of control. So there are lots of ways which are non-hormonal and non-medication, which can really significantly help with menopause, because not everybody can take HRT, not everyone can tolerate it, or no, well, people may not necessarily want to take it for various reasons.
Okay, these are a couple of questions from me. As an AuDHDer, I've noticed that since starting perimenopause, my autistic traits have become far more prominent, and they almost overshadow my ADHD traits these days. I think this was the case in my childhood as well, as far as I can remember, but I can't help but wonder if there's a hormonal link somewhere. I've seen comments from other AuDHDers on my channel noting similar experiences, though some individuals say that their ADHD symptoms are kind of more in charge, or their ADHD traits are more in charge than their autism since perimenopause. I wonder if this is something that you've picked up on in your research, and if so, do you have any theories as to why this happens?
I remember people saying this quite a few times, and we've had people we've had people in both camps again, I would say. The ones that most clearly spring to mind were saying that their ADHD was the more difficult thing in their lives during menopause.
Right.
However, what I think was really interesting was something, I can't remember who said it, but I think they hit on something profound and real. If you're ADHD, I think which aspect of your neurodivergence is sort of in the driving seat will change throughout your life, and depending on your context. So say I'm at university and I'm ADHD, then some aspects might really work well for me, like my autistic focus on detail, but other aspects at that point in my life might be more challenging for me, like my ADHD. Whereas in other times of my life, my ADHD will be really helpful, whereas my autism will be less helpful. So I feel like,
Yeah.
a bit like you're saying, at different points in your life, certain traits will help you and others will help you less, and then that will change depending on where you're at. But that's quite an
Yeah.
unscientific answer.
No, but it's fascinating. Thank you for that. It's really, really interesting. And finally, sorry, did you have anything else to say there, Julie? I'm dreadful at
No, I think Rachel explained that really well, and it is really fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And finally, for those of us that are having a tough time in perimenopause, is there hope after menopause?
Do you want to start with this one?
Should I start?
I think you
Yes.
should.
Yes is the answer to that.
Yay!
So, I mean, our experts and other participants that we've worked with in our studies, they've spoken about what we call the silver linings of postmenopause, or the positives of menopause, as we called it in the book. So there is a chapter just devoted to the positives of menopause, and some of the things that people were saying were about caring less, in a positive way, caring less about what other people thought of you, caring less about things that were perhaps they really cared about before. But this is a good thing. Slowing down and accepting life and the emotions that you're experiencing. So this acceptance was really really important, and also pruning and refining your relationships, which is how we kind of described it. People were talking about how certain relationships were really important to them, and other relationships that were perhaps a bit more, perhaps toxic even, there were ones that they felt they no longer needed to keep up those relationships. They could, again, it goes back to caring less, thinking I don't need to kind of keep facilitating or fueling that relationship anymore. So they felt freer, and also freedom from periods was something that came up, always comes up a lot, and a learning process of self-discovery and growth. So that there was this real sort of often creative side and self-discovery and growth that they experienced post-menopause. So life on the other side of menopause was, can be good. It's not all negative.
That's so good to hear.
I may have missed something there, Rachel.
No, I was thinking about one of our participants who said it's been a springboard for me to do amazing things. I think it's important to. I wanted to speak really quickly to. I remember one of our book experts who said, "I thought I would just go back to exactly the way I was afterwards." So
Yeah.
we don't want people to kind of hold like an incorrect belief, but it's kind of a bit like if you go through any period that's sort of challenging, not even necessarily challenging in a bad way, but you grow through it, don't you? You're not the same. You're not exactly the same after you've had those experiences. But exactly as Julie said, we had lots of people saying, I'm more at peace with myself than I've ever been before menopause.
That's a really well, just really, really hopeful thing to kind of to finish on, really. I'm just, I think the book itself did give me kind of a realistic take on this, as you just said, Rachel. I think that quote was so important, that although we hear from some people, neurotypical people as well, that they felt great after in post-menopause, that very often you won't feel exactly the same as you did before, because it is just such a huge transition. So that's really given me really useful advice there, because I haven't got a clue what to expect, but even if I am able to get a semblance of maybe who I was beforehand, I think that would be sort of amazing. But I'm being pragmatic about things, because you have to be, don't you? So I found that quote really, really useful. So thank you for including that, because I think it's really important. So yeah, just thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I know the community has been just so grateful and so thankful for your time as well, because they've told me. So thank you. So I'm going to give them a final plug for your book now, because I think it's just essential reading, as I said earlier. One point that I just want to make, actually, because it's just coming to mind now, that a few people in Canada mentioned that they were having difficulties with purchasing the book. So I don't know if that's something that you're aware of. Just a little bit of feedback for you there, really.
No, I didn't know that, and I'm not quite sure why that would be.
That was a few weeks ago, so it might be corrected in the system now, but maybe that's something that you want to maybe check on.
We can feed back to the publishers, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a couple of people, so yeah, in Canada. So
it'd be interesting to know
hopefully that'll be sorted out.
when they watch this video, maybe they can comment and let us know if it's still an issue.
Yeah, I'll let you know if I hear further on that. Yeah, but yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I know that I'm going to be rereading this at some point, and as somebody with dyslexia, that's as much of a compliment as I can give you, because I'm not a great reader, really. But yeah, I loved it, and it just felt like I was part of the club, or part of a gang, really. So yeah, I will leave a link down below for the book, but I think you can get it anywhere, really, can't you, from good bookshops and stuff. So yeah. Rachel and Julie, thank you so much for your time. So needless to say, I found this conversation really emotional at times, which I just wasn't expecting at all. And it just goes to show how we can be affected by perimenopause, and how difficult it can be. And it's certainly been a difficult process for me at times, and I'm sure many of you out there will be able to relate. So I hope you found this video useful, and if you have any useful advice or tips and tricks about how you're getting through perimenopause, or perhaps you've been through the process, by all means leave them down below, because I'm sure many of us would be very interested to hear. So thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far. Comments would always be appreciated, and if you don't know what to say, leave an orange heart down below for friendship, and I'll see you again soon.